Loving Sai Ram, Brother Ravi Mariwalla. Welcome to the series Awake, Unite and Inspire, a series that has been prepared and shared through the Sri Satya Sai Global Council, Trinidad and Tobago. We are extremely happy, we are blessed, and I feel very honored to conduct this interview on your personal journey and transformation at the divine lotus feet of our beloved Mother Sai, Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba. So, a warm and loving welcome to you, Brother Ravi Mariwalla.
Thank you, brother. I'm happy to be here and so delighted to have this forum to share some of my thoughts and definitely, those wonderful and sweet memories that Bhagwan gave us during the course of my stay at Parthi and beyond.
So, our first question to you, brother, is how did you first come into contact with beloved Mother Sai?
Sure. That responding to that question brings back a flood tide of sweet memories. And I like to preface recounting that time when I first met this great avatar, this great being, uh, because it's not only about my journey and my experiences and how Swami, the great magnet that he was, pulled me to his lotus feet. That was definitely the beginning of that era for this soul's journey. But I think it's important for every devotee who comes across this conversation, this recording, this video, to think about their own journey with the avatar. And I think why is it important? Because it's probably the the beginning of a very sacred transition and a transformation. So with that, I'll tell you about what was happening to me. I was this typical Mumbai boy. I lived in one of the suburbs of Mumbai, which everybody knows about. It is Bandra. It was a very uh, rich neighborhood, and uh, during my upbringing, I started to clearly get into a lot of different sort of company. I don't want to call it necessarily bad company because we were young boys, but when I look back, I can clearly see that I didn't have a lot to be proud of. Let me just put it that way. And it was during that time, and this is what is most important for all of us, that how does that saving grace, how does that pivot point happen in our lives? I am one of the examples, and so are all of you, because at that point, one of my aunts who lived in Delhi and who was very close to Bhagwan, who had had number of wonderful experiences and had witnessed a major cure herself, told my mother about Swami. And this was in the year 77, 1977. So by that, you'll now be able to kind of guess my age, which is a problem for me, but it's one of those things. But I also want to use that date and that time period to sort of contextualize what Bhagwan was. Bhagwan was so vibrant. His body truly reflected that transcendent energy that he embodied. And it was truly a privilege to see him at that time. But in that frame of mind that I was in, influenced by people who were, going the wrong way, I we did go to Dharmakshetra, which is the Swami's major ashram in Mumbai, and but I made sure that while I accompanied my mom, I made sure that I was the last individual out of those, I don't know, 30 or 40,000 people. I was the very last individual. And the memory that I have of Swami is that he came down walking that entire aisle and he stood fairly close to me. And as I think back to this very sacred moment in my life when I first gazed at this transcendent being, he stood there. He was completely relaxed. Obviously, he had mesmerized those thousands of individuals from that very stressful uh, but financial capital of India, right? Mumbai. Everybody was in that moment of mesmerization, and Swami just stood there without any agenda, even without letters in his hand, and he calmly waved his hand in circles. I don't know what happened to me, but despite all the clutter of my mind, all the worldliness that I was being exposed to, I felt a deep stirring, a deep sense of conviction, even in those few seconds that had transpired. And I just remember when I met my mother, there were throngs of people after darshan leaving uh, that place. When I met my mother, both of us exchanged notes, and I told her, if there is God on earth, this has to be. So, though I was only in my seventh grade, it didn't take me time to recognize the incredible experience that I had just undergone. And though I don't want to claim that it was a transformative experience, but definitely, if it was anything, it was the beginning of a transformative journey for me. And then, you know, what is more important for us to take away from this incident is that how much ever you can accumulate in your mind all the worldliness, all the negative energies that you may gather through your interactions in this lifetime and through what Baba called vasanas, which are the seeds of wrong tendencies that we carry forward in our mind. What I want to tell you, brothers and sisters, this is my own experience. That doesn't matter. The power, the great force that Swami embodied, in comparison to that, our negative energy, our worldliness just fades into insignificance. And it's not as if today we are all completely pure and completely otherworldly. We continue to have those tendencies. We may even continue to sometimes indulge in negative actions. But the hope for us is that experience that despite our negative energies, despite our not always wanting to walk the path of pure spirituality, the positive force that Sai is with us, and that is what matters. So, as my life proceeded, I was then, I saw a ray of hope for myself, and I was able to take certain steps to come out of the sort of throes and the web that was starting to get woven around me that would have dragged me downwards. And I always remember how true all Bhagwan's statements are, because the moment I took those steps to sort of drive towards Swami in my own small way and just jettison overboard those little things that were in my mind, which were starting to take hold, the phone rang, and Mr. Indulal Shah, who was one of the very important leaders of the Sai movement, called my mother, and he said, Bhagwan is making a sudden visit to from Puttaparthi to Mumbai, and we are caught off guard. We are looking for speakers. Would your son be willing to make a speech in the next 3 or 4 days and talk about his experiences as a Balvika student? And I tell you, as I look back at these moments, and yes, I had a great opportunity I will share with you those pictures of my interaction as a seventh, eighth grade boy standing on the stage with Bhagwan. And I got this lifetime memory. But I want to tell you of a more important facet of our interaction with Swami, which is if you look to me, I look to you. If you take but one small step towards me, I promise I will take 1,000 steps towards you. For me, that whole incident of being in Swami's presence momentarily, taking steps to come out of a life that would have been negative and very worldly, resulted immediately in a wonderful, loving, and redeeming response from Swami, which then continuously has been the lighting, the light in my whole life. So Swami implanted at that moment that light, that spark that has continued to with me throughout my life. So that is how I sort of see the immense grace that accompanies our first meetings with Swami. And I often go back to those moments and delight in them. But there is no pride, there is no arrogance in that delight, but there is a gratitude that Swami, in your wonderful unseen way, you entered my life, you inspired me as you have inspired so many millions. And then up until this moment and forever, you are ceaselessly working for my transformation. But it began at that beautiful moment in Dharmakshetra in 1977. Saira.
Oh, brother, how lucky, how fortunate you are to have been introduced, to have been a benediction of His grace at such a tender age. Really, really a wonderful blessing. So, I want to expand a little bit and ask you what is or what was that experience like being in the Bal Vikas and also the Pre Sevadal? Share a little bit about that experience and those. I know it would have been formative foundation years of spirituality in your life.
Yes, yes. No, that's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking that because um, when I look back at how Bhagwan, through his Balvikas teachers, shaped my life, again, a lot of gratitude wells up in my heart to those people who took the pains in a completely voluntary way to spend their time uh, helping us cultivate the seeds of spirituality. And I always marvel at the Balvikas program because it it helps young and tender minds to at an early age recognize and identify with a different set of values. So I remember with great pleasure, a feeling of joy, and a lot of fun as well. Those years that I spent as a Balvikas kid, uh, they were not for a moment. Then also never does a thought arise about those days, those Balvikas classes being cumbersome at all. The people were smiling. They would make us do bhajan. They would narrate a lovely story. And then I want to sort of fast forward to what was it that was the main nugget, the main gem that I received from these teachers. And that was the fact that they narrated to me that if you really wanted to get close to this mesmerizing, wonderful personality of Sri Satya Sai Baba, you should look at the life that the Satyasai students are leading in Puttaparthi. And I remember in the home of one of our Balvikas gurus. One day, an a current student of Bhagwan arrived. And to me, that again highlights a very big transition in my life, because as I interacted with this current Sai student, he was a person who was clicking pictures around Swami. Imagine again, this is the year 78, 79, and Swami was giving him an extraordinary degree of access to be around Swami, to take those pictures. And at that moment, I felt like I wanted nothing else in my life. I was going to school, I was in the eighth grade, I was going to school. I had this great opportunity to speak in front of Baba. And, I made a resolve that I should join Baba's college if he would permit me, and if that would be possible. And then I met another Sai student who was also in Brindavan, and the experiences he was having was amazing. So meeting these two Sai students happened through the sort of arrangement at the Balvikas Guru's place, and they inspired me to a completely new level, to a completely different level. And I sort of resolved to do everything in my power to land up in Puttaparthi and to get that proximity, to taste the nectar of being around Baba. And then I also want to say, when I graduated from Balvikas and I went into Pre-Sevadal, I had a very memorable set of gurus. This person was Mr. Nanavati. He lived in Khar, very close to the Ramakrishna mission. He was a Harvard educated lawyer. But, brothers and sisters, see, the things that come into your life are not introduced to you by chance. They make a very major impact on your life if you care to notice them. In the house of Mr. and Mrs. Nanavati, there was an entire large room dedicated to the altar, where they would hold pre-sevadal classes, and they would also hold a study circle. The study circle would attract more than 50 to 75 people, and it was on a weekday on Wednesdays, but people would throng there to listen to Mr. Nanavati's exposition on Bhagwan. And he would drive from Mumbai to Parthi 3 times a year. And without fail, every time he came back, he would tell us firsthand about an interview that Baba had given him. So, but what I wanted to tell you was that in that puja room, which was quite a large room, there were about 12 to 15 large pictures of Bhagwan. They were not mounted in a very fancy way. There was like a three-tier sort of mounting, but every picture of Bhagwan had vibhuti flowing from it. Every picture. When you entered that room, you would sense Bhagwan's presence. And imagine living in a house where Bhagwan's presence is so strong. So, as I look back at these years, definitely Swami, through these great individuals, my Balvikas teachers, my Pre-Sevadal gurus, created a major impact on my mind. But beyond that, he was himself there through these very extraordinary sights and experiences. And what I want to leave with you is that Baba is never far. And it's just that we were fortunate in those days to have these strong signs even there in a city like Mumbai. But then what was more important was that inspiration that I derived from these things to take that step of desiring to become Baba's student. Thank you, Sairam.
Very, very wonderful and inspiring sharing, brother. So many golden opportunities afforded to you by the loving grace of Mother Sai. But I want to go back to the request by Shri Indulal Shah to have you give a talk, request you to do a talk at such a tender age in Dharmashitra. So, share with us a little bit about that experience. How did it come about? What was your feeling like? Your preparation for the talk? How did it bring you closer to Mother Sai?
Definitely. So, like I said, I was this young boy just making the transition, and when I gave up those, I took that one step and sort of moved in the direction of giving up that set of things that I was into. The phone rang, and then I got called. Of course, I was very concerned. I had never made a speech in my life, and my mother helped me by writing out a speech for me, and I decided one thing which has continued with me even now, that I would speak from my experience. And I tried to stay true to that. I narrated to my mother, and she wrote it in better language for me. That one of the big benefits for me, after I turned the corner, after I started attending Balvikas and that experience after seeing Swami, was that I became able to focus on things much more. And I remember, in India, at that time at least, they still gave you a rank in the class. It was a big classroom. We were about 60 students, massive classroom. And I remember I was always ranked pretty bad. Just to share with you, because it's one family, this is not something I'm proud of, but I was ranked between 23 and 27 in a class of 60. Nothing to be proud about. And I'm not trying to sensationalize this, but only 1 year after I attended Balvikas, my rank increased from 23 to 27 to rank third. I was ranked third in the class. And this was not some miracle that Bhagwan performed. This was not a grace that he gave me by, giving me some extra marks. He, and this is what I saw in later years too, he worked through my mind by cleaning up my mind, improving my focus, and that newfound concentration that I was able to bring to bear. Studies, academics are a very small achievement for one who's able to focus his mind due to the spiritual sort of orientation that you develop. So that was one thing that I spoke about. Another thing that I had, because I was a seventh, eighth grader, was a fear of the dark. And after I came into Swami's fold, I spoke with the Balvikas gurus and interacted with other Balvikas children. I learned the power of the name. That has remained with me up till now, and I'm sure that is the same with all of you. The power of the name is huge. When you're scared, you may not be able to even visualize Swami's beautiful form, but definitely you can chant Sairam, 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 Sairam. And one of my aunts, that aunt who introduced us to Swami, had told me, Ravi, if possible, don't only chant Sairam, because it'll become a little bit of a chant by rote, and you'll not think about the value in that word Ram and Sai. So, and this is a beautiful hint she gave me, which worked with me for very many years. So I used to say, Om Shri Sai Ram, make me pure. Om Shri Sai Ram, make me pure. This was sort of an internal rhythm for me. And brothers, sisters, these are some of the things that I narrated in front of Swami. And let me just tell you what happened. When I went up the stage, and I'll share a picture with you as well, these are very sacred memories. These memories are far more than a personal memory. They are gifts of the interaction of this transcendental force that Bhagwan embodied for all of mankind. It just happened that the transcendental force made contact and inspired me for those moments. but those memories are for all of us to elevate and raise our consciousness. When I went up the stage, this was not actually in Dharmakshetra, this was in a neighboring suburb called Ghatkopar. When I went there, there was a makeshift stage and there were all of 40,000 people there. I had no idea that I was going to speak in front of such a massive audience. I had tried to memorize my speech, and we had taken a very beautiful garland. And as I went up to the stage, Swami actually got up from his chair, his throne, and he walked towards the steps. And I was this little boy in my ending my seventh grade. And as I raised my hand sort of unconsciously with that garland, Bhagwan bent down, took the garland and helped me put it around his uh, neck and shoulders. That's a very, very rare grace. In the later years, we could not, even though I lived at Puttaparthi for so long, you could not garland Swami. That was a beautiful access we had and privilege we had in those days. And then during the time that I spoke, there are pictures I have, they are black and white pictures, but Swami was almost continuously looking at me like this as I spoke. He was turned in his chair and he was looking at me. And when I tell you that Swami was looking at me, it is not at all a sort of uh, statement that wants to show that there was something great in what I was saying. What could a seventh, eighth grader say that this great avatar needed to hear or look at me for? What I believe he was doing was through his divine sight, he was purifying me because I had always prayed, Om Shri Sai Ram, make me pure, Om Shri Sai Ram, make me pure. I think he was, through the act of his divine sight landing on this body, he was purifying me and raising my level of consciousness. After my speech, he applauded me. And then, when I was about to take namaskar and bow down at his feet, he told me that the footstool has got pointed edges so that I should be careful not to hurt my head. And then, after I touched his feet, he materialized Vibhuti, gave it to me in my hand. My hand was all full of perspiration. And I held that Vibhuti there tight. I knew that this has tremendous value. But then he told me, that I should eat it. And now when I look back, it makes sense because with all the perspiration of, having spoken to 40,000 people and shaking knees and all of that, it was better to ingest the vibhuti rather than to make it so wet. Of course, a few strands of that vibhuti remained for my parents after that meeting. But what is more important, brothers and sisters, as I sat at his side, he told me where to sit. Swami put his hand on my back and rubbed my spine a couple of times. As I look back with gratitude that this human body was blessed to feel that divine touch, I believe that he was raising my consciousness. And then he asked me in what grade I was. And I said, Swami, I am in my entering my eighth grade. And he asked me, what do you want to do afterwards? And I had heard all this about Swami's students and the opportunity. And I wanted to be one of that white army marching into the mandir. So I made brave to request him, Swami, I would like to come to your college after my 10th grade. But I also hasten to add, in my own childish foolishness, but Swami, my father doesn't believe in you. And he said, don't worry, I know mother को devotion है, लेकिन father को अंदर में है. And I'll translate. He said, don't worry, I know your mother is devoted to me. But here is something you don't know about your father. Your father is devoted to me internally. And then he said, after your 10th, you apply and I will give you admission. So this was a truly amazing, incredible experience that I had. And I'm totally grateful to Bhagwan. There is absolutely not a piece of me, not a part of my consciousness that deserved that level of grace as I just recounted to you. And that grace is redeeming, that grace is exhilarating, that grace is not personal. So when devotees or students narrate these stories, I am exhorting you all to let the narration of this incident go beyond the personal and let it open those floodgates of inner joy for you. Because this transcendent being that Bhagwan was, it goes completely beyond the limitations of a personal body. So rejoice at the experience of how this transcendent being interacted and raised our, elevated our consciousness through his interactions with us. Saira.
Wow, brother, what a truly wonderful divine experience at such a tender age. First, to be given the opportunity to speak in front of Swami, and then the love that he showered as the love of 1,000 mothers, making sure that you, when you bow, that your head does not get injured, and massaging your spine. We don't know what the power of this avatar can do. At that very tender age, you received so much of his grace and blessings. And then literally telling you that you make the application and you will come to Swami's institution. Which leads me to the next question. You were there in Swami's universities from 1982 for a period of 9 years. What a tremendous blessing it must have been. Can you share a little bit about those years in Prashanti Nilayam under the watchful and loving eyes, the guidance of Mother Sai? If you can pull out a few of your most memorable experiences and life lessons, we would love to hear them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So many beautiful memories arise. And, you know, during my first couple of years, I was part of the Vedam chanting group, and I had a chance to accompany Swami in a procession. So I had to learn Veda chanting. All the activities that were offered to us, that were available to us, were centered around Swami. So Veda chanting was one example. Another example was that you could help to in the process of serving the students in the canteen, in the kitchen, and I sometimes did that. uh, there were many other opportunities, such as working in the hostel for the maintenance of the hostel, because no external person entered the hostel. And then there were plenty of opportunities to directly serve the public during major events like Narayan Seva, which was held in the, earlier to what you see today as the Hillview Stadium, where the major birthday celebrations are held. It was a barren land and it was at different levels. So the Narayan Seva would be held there. So one of the memories that I have, which I'll quickly narrate, it's a fun memory, is that I was in my 12th grade. I just spent a year there and I was not having much interaction with Swami. Of course, when Swami passed us in the veranda in the mandir, we could touch his feet any number of times. And I remember one day in my 12th grade, he passed me so many times. And I had an opportunity to touch his feet upwards of 25 times in one evening. And I say this with a lot of humility because, like Kabir said, if you chant the name of Ram once, it's enough. So it was probably my childishness to want to touch Swami's feet as many times as he passed me. Maybe I should have refrained from that. But Baba never, sort of held back from us. He gave himself to us. And then coming back to this memory, there was a Narayan Seva being organized, and Puttaparthi is a hot place, very stuffy. We were all perspiring, and I was just standing there. I had served the some of the people who were sitting in the lines, the poor people, with food, and Swami himself was serving some of them. Then he came to one of the stalls that we had set up there, a temporary structure, and he wanted to distribute saris and dhotis, right? And this is what the men and women in India wear. And he pointed to a big bundle of saris, and I was a very new student. I probably was a little bit too proactive. I should have held back, but wanting to have this opportunity to be near Baba, I sort of jumped at what I thought Swami was pointing to. In the meanwhile, Bhagwan had turned his back and started walking towards the thousands and thousands of poor people who had gathered there to be blessed by Swami and to take a prasadam of food and a garment from Swami. So I just picked up that bundle of saris and ran behind Swami. Swami walked a couple of 100 meters and turned back to see to take that sari and then start distributing it to the women. And I ran up to Bhagwan and he pulled one of those saris and he saw that that was not the sort of sari he was looking to carry. And you can imagine, I was fairly new. I had never had this proximity of an interaction. But I felt very guilty for having done the wrong thing and not been able to recognize which bundle Bhagwan was pointing to. And then having taken the lead when there were so many experienced students. And that's the beauty of the experienced students. They never intervened and interfered. Because I took that step, they let me take it, and I learned from Bhagwan. Poor Bhagwan had to walk back 200 meters to that stall and then have somebody bring the correct set of saris. But the incident doesn't end there. And see, in our foolish over enthusiasm, what can happen. So Bhagwan told me, put those saris back. And I was not used to communicating with Swami. So I went to one table that was a temporary structure and I tried to put the saris back there, not realizing that that table was overloaded and it was a temporary structure. I was so sort of stressed out or het up that I had done the wrong thing and Bhagwan had to walk back because of me, that without assessing the weight of how much weight that table could bear, I quickly offloaded that set of saris to sort of remove the blame from myself. And that entire table crashed to the floor, and all the saris and other garments that were on it were all messed up and mixed up. And Swami, with a twinkle in his eye, recognizing that it was just over enthusiasm on my part, you know, did not scold me or anything, but I could see that, I had to be more alert, learn the ways, and then become useful to Bhagwan. So that was one fun incident that I had. And then many, many, many beautiful incidents happened. I'll tell you one other quick incident. In my later years, was I had the opportunity to become close to Bhagwan physically, and and I want to tell you, it's not easy. So out of these 9 years that you referred to, brother, my first 7 years with Bhagwan, I didn't have much opportunity. And it's not nice to say that because I had so many namaskars, I had so many opportunities to give aarti to Swami. I had Swami one day when I came out of a classroom. Swami was standing, and I had not shaved because I was writing an exam. I was not clean shaven, and I didn't know that Bhagwan is in the corridor. And Swami, when I opened the door of the classroom and came out because I'd finished one exam early, I saw Swami. And Swami said in Telugu, Em chestunavu? And I said in completely wrong Telugu, but I wanted to respond in Telugu. So I said, Aipoinda, exam Aipoinda. Instead of saying, Swami, exam Aipoindi, I said Aipoinda. And Swami smiled. He acknowledged my desire to sort of speak and communicate with him in Telugu. And he didn't mention that I have not shaven because, it was an early morning exam. But those were the sort of interactions we had many times from our classrooms. When we looked at the road, at that time there was only one major road in Puttaparthi. We would see Bhagwan's red Benz car. And when you looked long enough at the car, as the car proceeded, you could see the big black halo of Bhagwan's hair from the back of the car. So we had so many opportunities, but basically our entire life was sort of knit together through Bhagwan. It was all focused on being close to him and on interacting with him. And so I wanted to tell you what happened in a later year, but so many memories are sort of flooding my mind. Excuse me for that. But you know, a lot of our interactions were external body reactions, body interactions. But one thing that I want to tell you to give you a different view is that one day Swami went to Brindavan and he went for a very short duration. Normally, Bhagwan would go from Parthi to Brindavan and he would go for a month or two, and in summer, he would probably go for 2.5 months. At this point, he went just for a week to Brindavan and he came back. And it so happened that that was the time when Swami was talking to me quite a bit. I was going to the interview room virtually every day, and Swami would address a small group of his students. So Swami was so much in my consciousness that during that short span of just a week that he was away, I had 3 dreams of Bhagwan. Can you believe it? 3 vivid dreams of Swami during a short span of 7 days. Now, when he came back from Brindavan on the 7th day, he went into the bhajan hall and I was seated a little bit behind in the veranda. And not being able to see him because I was not inside the bhajan hall, I closed my eyes and was singing, following the bhajan very loudly. And I was very close to the big speaker that used to be kept there. I did not realize, with my eyes closed, my mind and body fully singing, and the speaker blazing loud in my ear, blaring loud in my ears, I didn't realize that Swami had got down from the bhajan hall chair and come up to where I was sitting, and he was standing in front of me. I was blissfully unaware of that. And Swami tapped my forehead like this. And there was so much loud music, right? Because the massive speaker was right there. And of course, I was totally uh, in bliss that Bhagwan had sort of awakened me by tapping my forehead. That was his oneness. But I was to discover a deeper level of oneness in the next minute. Through all that blaring loud music, Swami asked me. First, he said a sentence. He said, "Very good communication." And I was totally taken aback. I wanted to ask, Swami, what do you mean? But two things prevented me. One is wisdom of not asking a question like that to Swami. Second is the amount of noise. So I just remained bowed on my knees and trying to catch what Swami was saying. Said, very good communication. And then he said, how many times did I come in your dream? He asked me in Hindi. Kitna bar dream mein aaya? Now you can think about this moment, brothers, sisters. That was not at all in my mind at that moment. And here was Bhagwan asking me something that only I knew of, only I had experienced. And that was an inner personal experience that I had had over just that short span of 7 days. And imagine that moment, and imagine him asking me, Kitna bar dream mein aaya? He didn't say in what duration, in what time span. That communication of Bhagwan is so perfect. He just merely asked me, how many times did I come in your dream? And I automatically understood that Swami is referencing this period of time while he was away. And during that time that he was away, he was still with me. He was still giving me indications, evidence, proof of his being with me. But it didn't end there. Foolishly, not able to do the math in a jiffy like that, I quickly ventured to Swami 3 times. I did like this, Swami 3 times. And Swami admonished me. He said, Dona Pota, like Shirdi Baba used to say, much harsher term, he used to say shaitan, which is not a good word, but coming from the divine lips of Shirdi Sai, he's admonishing you, he's raising your consciousness. Swami said, Dhunapota, which is a much milder term, which means that you're like a dense buffalo. The buffalo just stands there in the water all day, lazy. So Swami said, Dhunapota, I came 4 times in your dream. And then it struck me that I had forgotten the fourth dream, and I was sort of discounting that because the other 3 dreams were very much more vivid. There was more interaction with Swami. In the fourth dream, what had happened is Swami appeared and he gave me namaskar. And I was just discounting the fourth dream because there was not much happening in it. But the fact was that I had had 4 dreams of Swami during that short span of 7 days during which he had traveled. So, brothers, sisters, while we talk about the namaskars, the vibhuti materialization, the opportunities to interact, talk with Bhagwan, to ask him questions, to clarify our doubts, all of that is merely at the level of the body and the mind. But to me, this particular experience stands out because Swami is the indweller. And it's not as if even today I have realized that he is the indweller, but this is a guidance, this is a experience that constantly vibrates in my consciousness, telling me that not only did Swami give you those 4 dreams, you forgot one dream. He reminded you of it. He is your indweller. But not only that, he says good communication to you when the act of blessing you with the dream is his. The grace emerges from him, the grace emanates from him, and yet he praises you for good communication. So there are so many beautiful lessons packed in that incident, but it is all the more important because today, brothers and sisters, as we don't have the physical frame of the avatar in front of us, these events, these incidents, these experiences, and the body of these experiences that he created for us, it's not my experience, it's not your experience. It's a shared body of experiences that is out there to revive our spirits, to make us enthusiastic to continue to walk this spiritual journey. And more than anything else, to be full of joy and energy that Baba is always with us. There was nothing that I did to earn those four dreams, but He gave them to me. So it is pure and sheer grace from the Lord, despite how much negativity or worldliness we may have, that He just discounts that. That pales into insignificance in front of that mighty, divine, transcendental force that He is. So the thing is to rejoice in these incidents and to build our faith that He is the indweller through these examples. Saira.
Brother, absolutely, absolutely blissful. And you're taking us on this wonderful, divine inner journey with you. And we are experiencing, if only a fraction of the bliss, the gratitude, and the happiness you would have felt interacting with this majestic divine Lord. So, brother, you were also part of the speakers group and the brass band, and was very fortunate to have been selected to go with Swami to Kodaikanal and Chennai. I know to students, this is like a prize, a joyous opportunity, a golden opportunity to see Swami in a different light, to be in close proximity with him. Share a little bit about those experiences of going to Kodaikanal and Chennai with our loving Lord.
Yes, yes, I'll do that. Before that, can I just touch on one quick band experience?
Certainly.
So, the band was just forming. Swami formed the band, and through the medium of the band, we had so much grace flowing to us because most of us were not really musicians. And when Swami came to watch us, recognizing that it's going to take a while for us to really learn the instruments, and I was playing the clarinet, when he would want to hear us play, he would introduce us to the VIPs and say, he would sort of put a disclaimer that they're still learning to march, and then he would encourage us that way, because imagine being in front of Bhagwan, uh, all these great musicians, MS Subbalakshmi, great players would come and play in front of Swami. And one of the people instrumental in getting us those beautiful brass band instruments was a great jazz trumpeter, Maynard Ferguson himself. So imagine, right? So Swami was very encouraging, and but we also put in a lot of effort from our side. We used to practice for upwards of 14 hours a day, and many times Bhagwan would come, sometimes twice a day, he would visit us and hear us playing. I have fond memories of also him coming to the Hillview Stadium, and we were not organized as a band at that time. He put his window down and asked me to play just solo for him on the clarinet. Unfortunately, there are no pictures of these beautiful sudden interactions, but lots of different interactions we had with Swami like that personally. And one quick thing I'll tell you, one day he came to the hostel when we were relaxing in between our practice sessions. And this goes to show the naughty element of Bhagwan, the mischief of the Sai avatar, which sort of goes back to the days of the Krishna avatar, is playful nature. So I mean, we were all sort of relaxing, and the kettle drummer had gone up to the third floor. There was only one phone in the hostel, so he had gone to make a quick phone call to his parents. There were no mobile phones in those days. Swami came into that quadrangle. There was all sand in that place. And this drummer had little bit carelessly left his kettle drum and two kettle drum sticks, and one of them had slid off the drum and fallen on the sand. Now, when Swami came, we all became alert and we grabbed our instruments. We were not in white and white clothes, so but that we could not fix immediately. But we had to rush to be around Swami, and Swami had come alone and he probably wanted us to play. Now, this kettle drummer was up there 2 floors above us and he was making a phone call, but he heard that everything went silent in the hostel. So, sensing that maybe Swami has come, he looked down from the window and he saw us all standing like this. So he rushed down, guessing that Swami had come. It was just about 12 or 13 of us. The rest of the boys were in the mandir. Swami had come from the mandir, leaving devotees and students there to hear us play. Then, none of us actually had noticed that Swami, beautifully in his inimitable manner, noticing that one of those drumsticks had fallen down on the sand, picked up that drumstick and very coolly, very gently, almost without being noticed, put it behind his back and stood there like this. So we were all facing Swami. None of us knew that that kettle drum stick was behind Swami's back. And this kettle drummer came down rushing, panting. He was happy that he could get to the place while Swami was there. And Swami, seeing him, said, "Where were you? I'm waiting for you to play." Now, the drum, the brass band always starts playing with a kettle drum roll. There's a tar pum pum which they do on the kettle drum. So we could not start without that. And this kettle drummer was able to find only one stick on the kettle drum. He was totally lost. He put his hand through the sand, trying to look for the stick, but nowhere was that stick available. Now, one or two of us had noticed Swami sliding that kettle drum stick behind his back and standing as if he was innocently waiting for us. And, when are you guys going to start playing? And so one or two of us were sort of smiling behind our folded hands. And then suddenly he brought his hand forward and he said, "Oh, what are you searching for? Is it this?" And he gave it to that student. And then, of course, we got the kettle drum roll and we played. But this incident, and there are many, many such incidents that I can narrate to you, but the clock will break down. But what I want to tell you is that these blissful interactions, what do they show us? This being Sri Satya Sai Baba, Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba, who is today not available to us in blood and flesh, in flesh and blood, is not available to us to touch and to give us vibhuti by a wave of his hand, to bring the lingam out from his own mouth. This Satya Sai Baba is actually the transcendental force that, out of mercy for all of us, took that body, took that form, interacted with so many of us, and he cajoled us. He played with us. He asked the cricket score sometimes when a cricket match was going on. He did all this to sort of assure us that he's with us, that he understands us, that he continues to live with us. So he's not somebody distant. He's not austere. He's not unapproachable. He's approachable, available, and always with us. And with that, I'll just quickly summarize a little bit more about what you asked. And I'm sorry I digressed with this band experience. But visiting Kodaikanal is an incredible blessing, because at Kodaikanal and even on the way to Kodaikanal, we had numerous interactions with Swami. And in Kodaikanal, the we would spend a total of about 9 hours of our day and our evening in a close proximity of Bhagwan in his bungalow where he lived. Our sleeping place would I was fortunate. I got the opportunity to sleep in Swami's interview room in Kodaikanal. And we would also have every meal with Bhagwan. So now we are trying to lose weight. I'm trying to lose so much weight, but in those days we could accommodate a lot of more tasty food. So our day would start around 6:45 at the breakfast table with Bhagwan. He would walk around, ensure that we had at least 5 to 6 courses of a 10-course breakfast. And then he would talk with us informally for a couple of hours. We would be seated at his feet. Then he would perforce send us out because otherwise we would put on too much weight for a walk around the lake. Kodaikanal has a very beautiful lake, and that walk would take us about an hour. We never had, many of us just had flip flops, but we would go for that walk. And many times Swami would tell us, I looked at you all walking because from the bungalow, part of that place is visible. And he would say, you are all lazies. You walk slowly. I can walk faster than you. And then around 11:45 in the morning, we would have another very heavy meal. We'd eat lunch with Swami. Then Swami would retire. We would go behind him. He would ascend to his room, but we would follow him to the little landing room outside his room. And he would wave to us or, do this, or he would do fun things. Sometimes he would do this, as if he's in jest, mocking us or playfully talking with us. And during these Kodaikanal trips, many materializations happened. Many materializations. So the beautiful thing that happened during my trip, which was in 1991, was that he materialized a very long necklace. And he said that, so we were taking videos and we had many cameras, and he took a promise from us that we would not video that. But be as it may, one of the students still took video of that materialization of a very extraordinarily length of that necklace. And Swami showed us what he said were those were pearls. And he said, this is the pearl necklace that Mother Sita uh, gave to Hanuman. And Hanuman bit them and tried to see if they said the word Ram, and he threw them away. And this is that reformed necklace. But because we had been disobedient and taken the video of that materialization, despite promising not to take the video, Swami was upset. And what he did was, if you are a second or third grader today and you take a cell phone to your class, your teacher may confiscate it. So Swami, in a similar way, confiscated our video camera. And but see the blessing in that video camera, he took it into his personal chambers, and it remained there in the proximity of Swami for 2 to 3 days. And every day we would, sort of request him to return it. And then eventually he did. So we actually do have footage of that materialization. That is by his grace. He never asked us to delete it, but it's a truly memorable, materialization. But that's not the only materialization. So many materializations happened. And one other thing I'll quickly say and then stop this response is that I had a diary, and I realized early on that Swami's the discussions we are having are very powerful. Swami spoke about so many different issues, about the world, about leaders, about spirituality, about how to do the who am I practice, many, many different things he spoke about. So I started to write notes, and I still, with Swami's grace, I have that diary, and it has a lot of scribbling of all my notes. But what is important is that Swami used to see me looking down and furiously scribbling away. So he used to often ask me, "ए मारीवाला क्या करता है?" "ए, my last name Mariwalla. "ए Mariwalla, what are you doing? Why aren't you looking at me?" So I say, "Swami, I'm writing your speech in my diary." So you say, "But don't let it only remain in the diary. It should go into your heart." So oftentimes when I have referenced that diary, I have found great value, great nuggets in that. And I'm hopeful that, the value of that diary, I bring it out, share it with all of you at different occasions. So those were some of the highlights. There are many, many more things we can talk about, but those were some of the highlights of the blessing that we got. And there were bus trips. Swami would come into the bus, he would sit in the bus. It's incredible how Swami sort of came down to our level. My first name is Ravi. So when we were going in the bus, Swami was sitting and I was sitting at Swami's feet. There were many of us crowding around Swami from the back seat, front seat, others. And Swami looked from at the window, and he saw one of the signboards on a hotel. It said Hotel Ravi. So he looked at me and he said, "Tumhara hotel hai? Is it your hotel?" And I didn't know what's going on because I am sitting down at Swami's feet. But one of the other students later on told me that hotel was called Hotel Ravi. So Swami was always sort of coming down to our level, mixing with us, regaling us, making us comfortable. And it was up to us to keep front and center of our minds the fact that he is an extraordinary being. He was the avatar, and that we should not get deluded, just by these things. But those were great moments, and a lot of different students have had this great opportunity. So I'm sure you would have heard about it, seen a lot of those pictures as well. And that's also the place, by the way, where we got a number of opportunities to take individual pictures with Swami, with him sitting or holding a rose, and often we would stand next to him like this, and he would tell us to lower our hands and stand, without sort of being with folded hands in his presence. So a lot of those memories as well are there, Sairam.
So beautiful, so blissful, ever close to this avatar of love, and so many golden opportunities afforded to you all on these wonderful trips. So, brother, at this point in time, what does Sai Baba mean to you today?
Sure. And thank you for asking that question. Uh, so it is a little bit sobering. It's a sobering thought, uh, because right now, after all those and many more interactions with Swami and blessings to my family, which I can continue to perceive, continue to sense, I think at the current moment, I feel like the emphasis is on furthering my spiritual journey. I feel that Swami is waiting for myself to take those actions, for me to take those actions, and to invest more deeply in my own spiritual progress. And why do I say that? Uh, uh, it is because during those many, many years about 4 decades that I was fortunate to know him and then to experience him directly, what I realize is that it was not only the physical interactions that were happening, but that there were a number of deep spiritual awakenings that also happened. Some of them I vaguely sensed, but some of them I very tangibly felt. But probably because we were around Swami so much, and then in the later years, I was very blessed to spend a few years living in Swami's residence in Purnchandra Auditorium. So, probably because of these huge blessings, I did not capitalize on those spiritual awakenings that I knew I had sensed, I had felt, I had experienced. And I say this with a great sense of gratitude. Just 3.5 months back, I was blessed to be able to visit Prashanti Nilayam for Baba's 96th birthday. I'm very fortunate. My parents and my sister, they live there. My sister continues to serve in the primary school as a teacher. So it's a double home for me. I don't go for a short time. I go nicely. I spend a number of days there. And during that 96th birthday, you know, when you go to somebody's birthday, you give a gift and then you get a return gift. So I felt like Baba gave me a return gift. And what was that return gift? Unlike sensational big things, I realized that the very same awakenings that I had sensed, sometimes vaguely, sometimes more tangibly, that very same spiritual awakening that I had experienced number of times when my mind was calm, when I was in deep meditation, when I had connected very deeply with Swami, excuse me, that very same awakening Swami brought into my consciousness during the 96th birthday. And what I realized at that point is that that is what we have to choose. So none of us could have continued with Swami, visiting Puttaparthi, being Sai devotees, attending the Sai work, conducting service activities or Balvikas. None of us could have done this without having felt the spiritual awakening. That's my firm belief, and I think that is the most important takeaway from what I am saying today. So when I sensed and tangibly felt that return gift that Swami gave me in Parthi, I felt it is up to me to remain more established in that level of consciousness that automatically accompanies that spiritual awakening. And the multiple times that I have felt that spiritual awakening in Prashanti Nilayam, today it is up to me to make that choice to, as constantly as I desire, go back to that spiritual feeling and to immerse myself in that, to deepen that. And what will happen by your choosing to re experience that, to call that experience back to your consciousness, is that it'll become stronger, it'll become more real. And as it becomes more real, you will realize, probably I have still to experience that what we sought when we approach Swami, that self realization, that spiritual progress, all of that is possible for us to develop if we choose to redirect our attention, which today is so heavily centered around the body and the mind, if we choose to pull that attention incrementally, initially, gradually, away from our body consciousness and our mind consciousness. And what is the mind? This mind, Swami has described as having two traits, alochana and sambhashana. Alochana is planning. So the mind is a little bit of a GPS, how to get from point A to point B, how to prepare for my exams, how to go to the tennis tournament, how to go pick up my kids from school. That alochana, Swami says, or planning function of the mind is one. But the more destructive element of the mind, and these are purely Swami's words, is what Swami calls sambhashana. That sambhashana is repetitive argumentation and verbalization by the mind. And that is the cause of aging, according to Swami. That creates a barrier between the soul and your being aware of the soul. So, what to your question, what is it that I want to do today? I have sensed these spiritual awakenings on numerous occasions. Those occasions are self evident to me. There are particular days or particular events associated with those awakenings. And I'm sure all of you, I'm inviting all of you to look back to when you had similar spiritual awakenings. And it's not a big thing. We tend to ignore it because we are sort of looking for some big thing to fall from the sky. The experience of yourself is inherent in you, and many of us may have probably had that experience. So there are two things which I'm trying to do. One is, like Swami gave me that gift on the 96th birthday and showed me, made me revisit that experience. It was given to me. I didn't meditate, pray, do anything. I got that experience and I knew that I had had it many times earlier. So I didn't discard it. I didn't ignore it. I held on to it. I think my duty and all our duties are centered around re-establishing, constantly choosing that experience, and it will deepen itself. You cannot deepen that experience. All you can do is choose it over the world, choose it over dwelling in the body, choose it over constantly being in that sambhashana cycle or verbalizing and arguing and trying to solve all the problems of the world through your mind. So these are the two things that I think are uppermost in my mind. Re-establishing that spiritual experience that I already have and that now has been revisited upon me. And then, secondly, staying cautious about getting pulled into the rhetoric, into the sambhashana, into the constant cycle of argumentation in the mind. I think if I can do these two things, probably that is uppermost, and would Swami may be happy if I were to able to do these two things. It doesn't give me a sense of achievement, but I think it's clear to me that this will gradually lead to much deeper alignment with Swami than is possible merely by reading his teachings or remembering an experience or hearing a discourse. That alignment is just at the level of the words. And you can say, oh, Swami wants us to do service. But this alignment is something at a much deeper level. And probably it's at that oneness that Swami felt with us, which we can experience if we deepen that spiritual experience. I know it's hard to sort of communicate such a deep inner stirring that I have felt in the last few months in a few minutes, but I'm pretty sure all of you, and that's what I feel is my duty as one of the many blessed messengers of Swami. And because you are going to invest time listening to me, is to tell you that you must have had that experience. Revisit it, give it value, and then choose it over constant dwelling on the body and the mind. Choose it. But for that, you have to understand and analyze how your body and the mind pull you in that direction without your knowing it. And then alone can you, when you recognize that movement, that pull that forces you to sort of get deeply uh, enmeshed in body and mind consciousness. Unless you recognize that movement, you cannot choose this spiritual awakening. So these two things go hand in hand. And this is what Swami used to tell us: understand and adjust. Very beautifully, many times he would tell us, understand and adjust. See, Swami doesn't, you don't have to learn 700 verses of the Gita. Swami says, understand, adjust. So understand the workings of your mind. Beware, and then don't discard your deep experiences that you have had and constantly look for more talks. I want to go to a different saint. No, 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 no. That, if you ask me, what defines the Kali Yuga? Restlessness defines the Kali Yuga. You can't spend 1 minute without looking back at the notifications on your phone or this or that. So the restlessness, where does it arise from? It's a hallmark of our minds. But if you can be watchful enough to notice that your mind is now dragging you into it, and the mind always flits between the past and the future, it never remains in the present. So some of these signs, and Swami has spoken about this a lot. No need to go to any other saint. And why should you not go to other saints? Swami said, don't be like a bee going from flower to flower to taste the nectar. And he told me personally, I one day gave Swami a picture to sign. It was the picture of me bringing a cow to Swami on Gokulashtami, which is a big festival. And Swami is coming to the cow, which is Krishna Janmashtami, and giving a banana. And funny thing, that was the first time I went, and I thought that banana is for me, not noticing that the banana is to be fed to the cow. But Swami said to me, in jest, he said, this is not for you. And then he fed it to the cow. But that picture, when I gave it during an interview to Swami to sign, you know what Swami did? He took it and he said, what is this? And he made a great teaching out of it. Believe me, I am not capable of making such a teaching. Swami said, be the calves of this cow. Be the calves of this cow. So you and I have been chosen to be the disciples of this great avatar. And Swami said, again, I'm not making this up. These memories are so resplendent in my mind. He said, when the calves are born blind, they can't see. If the calf wanders to a neighboring cow, that cow will kick it, Swami said. So beware. Don't just go translate that into what we are doing today. We want to go to more saints. We are not satisfied. Swami was the embodiment of the highest spirituality. If we cannot get self-realization by following this great master, who never in history, and I'm happy to be challenged on this, there is no other recorded example in history of a divine personality who lived such an extraordinary life, performed as many miracles, raised the dead. One day I was giving a speech in Canada, And I said, there are 3 recorded incidents of Swami raising the dead. And somebody, one of the devotees from the back, said, no, brother Ravi, there are 7. And I said, I stand corrected. And then I went, so we don't even know the expanse and the extent to which the recorded miracles talk about Swami's not achievements, but his grace. So if we cannot inspire ourselves today to walk this path, it's not going to come by more teachings. It's not going to come by more masters. We have to sit at the feet of this great being, not externally, not in the puja room, but in the inner chamber of our hearts. And as you do it more and more, you will drop the need to do anything else. And Swami said, why do I want you to remain with one guru? Because the tejas, the aura, the power of that guru then comes into you. These are all from Swami's own speeches. But I'll stop with this. I know a long winded answer. Apologies for that. But please be inspired and go back to your own great spiritual awakenings that you have had and dwell on those, deepen those. There's nothing else you need to do. Saira.
Brother, that was so beautiful, so inspiring, so spiritually elevating, listening to you enunciate these spiritual truths and understanding that have come from the teachings of the avatar of the age, God Himself. So, thank you very, very much, Brother Ravi Mariwalla, for such wonderful insights, sharing your personal experiences as well as your practices of how you've understood them through directing interaction with Bhagwan. The Sri Satya Sai Global Council Trinidad and Tobago wishes to express gratitude and appreciation to you for taking the time to share your personal journey and transformation at the divine lotus feet of our beloved Mother Sai. May Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba continue to bless and guide you. May you continue to be the loving instrument you are as his mission continues to unfold. Jai Sai Ram.
Thank you so much, Brother Faiz. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity to share these jewels with all Sai brothers and sisters.